Nearly 8% of new vehicles in the United States are now electric. That's a huge deal. And part of the reason is because the vehicles are a lot cheaper than they were just a year ago. Plus, Tesla just produced its 20 millionth battery cell. You can now get an official Tesla wrap for your Model 3 or Model Y, and I think there's more to that than meets the eye, and a bonus story. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. A lot of interesting news to cover today. I'm going to start with this Tesla Summon feature saves owner locked out of parking garage story. It's, a relatively light fluff piece, but it was based in Vancouver, which I was just at, last month for the fully charged. So very, very cool. Kind of interesting that I saw that. Anyway, it's an interesting story about how the Summon feature can actually have a few very useful use cases. So most of this story by Fred Lambert in Electric, and by the way, of course, I will put the links to all these articles in the description so you can check them out at your own leisure. Anyway, it describes what Summon is and all of that stuff, but the interesting part for us is the end where we actually get the story about how the user actually used it to snag his car out of a locked parking garage. So here we can read the relevant part. Tesla Model 3 owner Jack Heshey parked his car in a parking garage in Vancouver, BC. When coming back to pick it up, he realized that he made a mistake and that the parking lot closes at 10 p.m., after which time you can't access the lot. Thinking on his feet, he decided to give Summon a shot and see if it could drive to the gate. The Model 3 actually did manage to drive to the gate, which automatically opened, giving him access to the vehicle. And so here you can see part of the video when the vehicle is actually arriving, driving in the parking garage and everything. And how excited they all are. If you want to watch this, of course, and read the original article, you can hear them cheering and everything. But anyway, apparently it tripped an electric eye or something like that and caused the parking garage to open, which made him very, very happy, as you can tell. Next up, let's talk about EV sales in the United States, which just hit 7.9% of the US market as Volvo, Mercedes, and Hyundai post sizable gains. So that is, of course, in addition to Tesla, which still dominates the US market at somewhere around 60%. I know it kind of varies up and down a little bit, but it's somewhere around the 60% mark. So they clearly are still the dominant player, but everybody who sells another EV is another internal combustion engine vehicle that is not sold. So this is all to the good. So reading this article by Peter Johnson, EV sales surged past 300,000 for the first time in the third quarter, a nearly 50% increase over last year. As automakers like Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, Nissan, and Hyundai ramp production, Tesla's market share is slipping. Again, slipping, I think, is from like 67 or 68% down to like 60%. But anyway, it's fine. A smaller market share of a bigger pie still means more car sales. So it's good for everybody that EV sales are increasing like this. The latest quarterly EV sale estimate from Cox Automotive dropped Thursday, showing a record 313,086 electric cars sold from July to September. EV sales have now expanded for 13 straight quarters. That is really, really good news. And go United States. I know we're behind, but we're catching up here. Electric vehicles accounted for 7.9% of total US auto sales in Q3, up from 6.1% a year ago and 7.2% in quarter two. So again, a nice steady increase over time. Volvo, Nissan, Mercedes-Benz, and Hyundai posted notable progress, with sales growing over 200%. The growth comes as new electric models hit the market. Over the past year, 14 new EVs have been introduced. Higher inventory, more availability, and lower prices have also contributed to the growth. According to Cox Automotive, EV prices are down 22% over the last year, with a $50,683 average price paid in September. And that actually dovetails very nicely with the next article I wanted to talk about by Michelle Lewis. The average EV is now $14,000 cheaper than a year ago in the United States. Reading through this a little, in September, the average price paid for an electric vehicle was $50,683, down from $52,000 and change in August. The downward price trend overall falls in line with Tesla's continued price cuts, notes Kelley Blue Book. Electric's Jameson Dow reported last week that Tesla's Model 3 and Model Y are now at their lowest prices ever, and explained that drops have also affected the rest of the EV market, as Tesla's dominant position, again, they have about a 60% market share, as the market and brand leader in EVs, along with its previously industry high margins, mean that it has more room to prevail in a price war against other manufacturers. And then we'll skip down here to the take. EVs are rolling off the production lines in the United States and filling up those previously pandemic empty dealership parking lots. And it's not a large supply of just a couple of options. 2023 saw the launch of about 15 brand new EV models, according to Stephanie Valdez-Streety, Director of Industry Insights at Cox Automotive. More models that cost significantly less, and let's not forget about that $7,500 federal tax credit, yes indeed, means more EV sales. That's why EV sales in quarter 3 2023 saw saw a nearly 50% increase year over year. So if you've been living under a rock, Tesla has steadily been decreasing prices of all of their models, the S, the 3, the X, and the Y, all year long, and making them less and less and less expensive and making them more and more appealing to the customers. I did a whole video about this and how it's a Trojan horse. You can check that out up here. Tesla ultimately does not really care about the hardware margins, about selling the vehicles themselves and what margin they make, as long as it's zero plus, right? They don't really want to lose a ton of money, but they don't really care a lot about making a ton on this hardware because it's a Trojan horse. So they can continue to reduce this to market clear, to basically sell every car they make. And other EV manufacturers are, of course, having to follow suit, which, of course, is depressing the price of the entire EV industry in the United States and globally as well. But I'm just particularly in the US. Anyway, if you add to that the $7,500 US tax credit that's available right now, that is a really big reduction in price. So the sticker price is like $50,000 or something like that. And Teslas are generally cheaper than that. Most of the Tesla models are on the order of $50,000 or less, and except for the S and the X, of course. But, you know, the mass market models are pretty inexpensive right now. But you tack onto that the $7,500 tax credit, which is definitely available for the Tesla models. It is available for some other EV models as well, but not all of them, because depending on where they're made and all that. But anyway, that reduces the price into the low to mid 40s for these vehicles. And that's just the average price. And that means that the average price of an electric vehicle right now in the United States is less than the average price of a gas vehicle. And that really makes a big difference. And of course, lest we forget the very famous S curve, the adoption curve here. So we've been living in this land way down here of innovators and early adopters, especially in the United States. Now, in a lot of other countries in Europe and certainly in China and everything, we're getting into very well into the early majority here. So we're well above 10%. But the United States is getting up, you know, close to 10%. So like 8% here. And this is generally considered to be the tipping point. Somewhere around that 10% mark is where the economies of scale, public perception, all of these kinds of social and technological issues combine to allow the whatever the technology is, television sets, electric vehicles, calculators, you know, you name it, whatever that thing is, it goes from early adopters and very slow adoption to very, very rapid adoption. And it's about that 10% mark where it really happens. And globally, new vehicle sales are at about 13% EVs. So that means that globally, we've already passed that 10% tipping point. And even in a relatively laggard country like the United States, we're at basically 8% now. So within a year, certainly, you know, maybe 2 quarters, maybe 3 quarters, maybe 4 quarters at the outside, we're going to be looking at 10% in the United States as well. And it's going to be ramping up. But even if the US is a laggard, if everybody else is selling more than 10%, it's just going to have to happen here as well. So it's all to the good. This is fantastic news, not just for Tesla, but for anybody who's making EVs, and especially quality EVs. That means you're going to be able to sell them. There will be lumpiness, of course. They'll produce too much, and then they'll have to lower the prices, and then they'll have too few. People will want more. So there's going to be, you know, that mismatch for a while in the market. And certainly we're seeing that right now. But generally speaking, you know, once you hit that 10% mark, it just takes off on its own, and you don't really have to goose it anymore. And you get up to around, you know, 80 to 90% where the laggards are still resisting. But most of the people have purchased whatever the technology is, in this case, electric vehicles. And now onto a couple of things that I think impinge on the Cybertruck and the imminent release of it. But you can see here, Tesla celebrates production of 20 million 4680 cells at Giga Texas. And while that's super cool, the really important part here is that the 10 millionth cell was made in June of this year. So we're looking at approximately 4 months, just a little less. I think it was June 17th. So just under 4 months, we're talking about 10 million cells. And of course, if you project that out without any growth, you're looking at that's a rate of 30 million cells per year. If you do a little division, some approximation on how many cells the Cybertruck is going to require and everything, you're looking at 30 million 4680 battery cells, equating to somewhere between 30 and 35,000 Cybertrucks, depending on exactly how many batteries are in the Cybertruck and all that stuff. But anyway, that's the ballpark sort of thing. And certainly, you know, it's going to take Cybertruck a while to ramp up to 30,000 vehicles a year. I would imagine they will probably be able to do that by the end of 2024, but also we're going to be looking at a ramp. I expect the next 10 million cells will not take 4 months, but more like 3 months or something. So we'll see this continue to get cut. And as every 10 million battery cells equates to around 10,000 vehicles, Cybertrucks particularly, that can be made, you're going to be looking at that ramp enabling bigger and bigger and bigger production of the Cybertruck. Now, of course, eventually the 4680 is going to have to be used for semi-trucks. It's going to have to be used for other models models and things like that. But right now, it looks like Tesla is hoarding all of these 4680s to make Cybertrucks. They're not really using it for anything else right now. So that's what they're using it for. That's what they're putting it into. And with 20 million of these cells, that's about 20,000 trucks. And that's going to take Tesla a while to build that many trucks. And of course, they're not stopping building batteries. So it's a big number, but it also needs to get bigger. But it's also a really good sign. It means that at least initially, the Cybertruck is not going to be battery constrained. So they will be able to build quite a few of these trucks based on the batteries that they already have sitting in their warehouses. And finally, speaking of Cybertruck, even though this doesn't look like it's about Cybertruck, let's check this out. Tesla now offers 7 wraps for Model Y and 3 in the US. By the way, you have to have a 2023 Model Y or Model 3. If you have a 2022 or 21 or something like that, sorry about that. You'll have to go to a third party. I'm sure somebody will wrap the car for you. So for customers in the US, now you can make your Model Y and Model 3 special and different from others. Tesla introduces vehicle wraps for the first time in the United States, offering interesting options. The new colors look amazing and will resonate with a lot of customers. Tesla offers 7 new colors: Glacier Blue, Satin Rose Gold, Forest Green, Satin Ceramic White, Crimson Red, Satin Stealth Black, and Slip Gray. I imagine this car right here is the Satin Rose Gold. I'm not positive about that, but anyway, looks really, really nice. Very, very high quality. You'll see that these prices are pretty expensive, but I just got our new red car, PPF protected. I only ended up doing the impact areas because doing the entire car was $6,000. That was for a clear wrap. So you can see that Tesla, it might be a little bit at a premium, but it's not that much at a premium because that's like $1,500 or $2,000 more than the clear PPF wrap. So it's in the right ballpark, even though it seems rather expensive. And just real quick, if you're wondering, the purchase price includes the cost of materials and installation at a Tesla service center. So I said at the beginning, this had to do with the Cybertruck. What does it have to do with the Cybertruck? I think this is Tesla figuring out how to do wraps and do it at a relatively small scale, because it's not going to be that many people who own a car with a paint job on it that are going to want to wrap it, all of that kind of stuff, right? So it's a relatively small market that's going to want to do that. So they can test this thing out. They can figure out how to do it, how to scale this sort of operation and everything, and how much to charge and all of that kind of stuff prior to the Cybertruck coming out. So when the Cybertruck comes out in large numbers, that's a vehicle that a lot of people are going to want to wrap. I'm predicting that. I can't guarantee it, but a lot more people are going to want to wrap their Cybertruck than are going to want to wrap their painted vehicles. So that's going to be a bigger market. And what I believe Tesla is doing here is playing a little, Ford chess. They're trying this out with vehicles that are not going to have as much of a take, so that they can do this at a small scale. They can pilot it. They can figure out the quality of wraps they need to use, the type of techniques they can do to do this at relatively efficient scale, all of that kind of stuff. Because wraps, most of the wrapping process is just the patience of, getting all the bubbles out and all of that kind of stuff. But of course, Tesla, if they manufacture these things, can manufacture them to exactly the right sizes, as opposed to a lot of other shops where they have to do a lot of cutting and things like that. So anyway, they can do it at a more efficient rate, but I really do believe that what they're looking at here is getting this ready for the Cybertruck. And you can see, of course, there's a lot of Cybertrucks already that have had, wrap jobs around them. So clearly Tesla is playing around with it and trying to figure out how to do it. And my prediction is, maybe you're going to be looking at maybe 5% of Tesla Model 3 and Model Y. That's a pretty significant take. I think it might be even less than that, maybe 1% or something. So it's going to be a small amount. When we get to Cybertruck, we could easily be looking at potentially 20% of Cybertrucks will have wraps, because people will enjoy doing that. And it will be a really, really interesting way of differentiating your Cybertruck. So I think Tesla is doing this to pilot the project and figure out how to do wraps before their predicted very, very large scale need to do that with the Cybertruck. And why give that to a third party who will make the money? Why not take it if you're Tesla? You can make an extra maybe $10,000 to wrap a Cybertruck. So that's a nice chunk of extra profit that they can add on top of a Cybertruck sale. And finally, on the topic of wraps, Dirty Tesla did a really interesting dive into wraps and Cybertrucks and corrosion and stainless steel in a video just yesterday, I believe. Anyway, I'll put a link to that in the description as well. Really interesting discussion. His concern is that basically stainless steel creates a chromium dioxide layer on the outside of the steel as soon as it comes in contact with oxygen, and that things like wraps can actually protect it from that oxygenation. And so if some corrosion starts inside somehow, that can actually spread because it's starved of oxygen inside there. So I don't know that would happen, but that is an interesting concern with wraps. Not something you have to worry about with paint because, of course, the paint has already been coated around this material and it's aluminum on your car, so it's not going to really affect it. But with stainless steel, it sounds like a wrap could potentially, we don't know this for a fact, but it could starve the stainless steel of oxygen, which it needs to make itself corrosion proof. And if it doesn't get that, it could actually corrode in places where the wrap is covering it. So I don't know. That's stuff that Dirty Tesla talked about. I have not looked into it myself. Interesting theory. Of course, it is stainless already before you put the wrap on because it's been in contact with air. But the idea would be if somehow a corrosion center started under the wrap and it couldn't get oxygen very quickly, it might start to corrode instead of getting the oxygen and getting that stainless coating on the outside. So anyway, just something to note. Well, I'm sure people will talk about it more as we get the Cybertruck on the road and people discover either that does or doesn't happen, and we will find out. But anyway, very interesting news on that front for sure. All right, I hope you found this rather diverse episode fun and interesting and thought-provoking. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon, my YouTube channel members, and of course, my ex-subscribers. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel in any way that you can. And of course, if you want to join any of the teams, just check out the links in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And finally, speaking of all these Teslas, don't forget that we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a new Tesla vehicle, a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.